It was when I was asked to help with outpatient consultations due to a shortage of doctors at the nearby large hospital. As I arrived at the hospital, I saw a beautiful patient standing alone in the garden, soaking in the heavy rain. "What are you doing out here like this?" Her eyes were red, her voice trembling as she said, "They told me they have no time to deal with poor people suffering from incurable diseases." Abandoning a patient was unthinkable. Feeling this way, I took out my phone, explained the situation to some brilliant doctors, and decided to help her. Little did I know that this decision would greatly alter the course of my destiny. My name is Harry Smith. I'm a doctor. But don't imagine some prestigious university hospital or anything like that. I work as a doctor at a very small, humble hospital. Our hospital's philosophy prioritizes caring for patients above all else. Given the hospital's size, we can't accept a large number of patients, but I believe that is precisely what makes it wonderful. Because of this, I was often busy, but I was rarely overwhelmed with endless consultations or surgeries. Today, I was on my way to the large hospital after receiving a request for help due to a shortage of doctors. The hospital is relatively close to where I work, and I always had the impression that it was overflowing with patients. Given its sheer size, it likely gave patients a sense of security. I understood that if multiple conditions were discovered, they could receive treatment and care all the way through recovery at the same place. And so, when the large hospital requests assistance, someone like me, who works at a small hospital, comes rushing to provide support. As always, the large hospital was bustling with patients, their families, and visitors. Yeah, no wonder they called me for help. Pushing through the crowd, I made my way to the waiting area, where my attention was immediately drawn to someone taking charge with an air of authority. Whenever I was asked to help, I had to check in with Shane, the son of the hospital's director, Mr. Carter, who was in charge. As I started walking toward Shane, I noticed someone groaning in clear pain, their expression filled with suffering. I didn't know the diagnosis, as I hadn't examined her yet, but it was obvious she was in bad shape. Just as I was about to approach the patient, Shane stopped me. "You're late. You need to get here immediately when we call you. This is a real problem." I had come as fast as humanly possible. But arguing back would only escalate things, so I just said, "Sorry." If you're sorry, show it through your actions. That patient over there looks like they're in serious pain. Can I take a look? Don't act on your own. That patient is fine. You can leave them alone. There's a patient who needs surgery right now. And that's where we need you. Without giving me a chance to object, Shane led me straight to the operating room. I couldn't stand Shane's methods. Even as I operated on the current patient, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other patient, the one Shane ignored, was in far worse condition. I was certain that patient needed surgery immediately. But I also knew it was useless to say anything to Shane. The patient I was operating on was the daughter of a major corporation's CEO. You don't need me to explain what that means. Shane prioritized patients based on their social status. There is a reason he does so. It is very obvious. Money. He took bribes from wealthy people. It was common for surgeries to be rescheduled, even if that meant postponing patients with serious conditions. Those who paid the most always came first. He had no sense of medical pride or ethics. No, I was certain Shane had none of that. Still, I said nothing. This wasn't the hospital where I worked. Of course, I had my opinions, but as an outsider, there was nothing I could do by speaking up. I carried out the surgery I was told to perform and quietly returned to my own hospital. Sometime later, I was once again summoned to the large hospital. "Come immediately. You have no right to refuse. Even if your hospital is busy, ignore it and get over here." Shane's arrogant tone hadn't changed. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. If they were so short-staffed, why not just hire more doctors? Well, I already had a hunch. Increasing the number of doctors would raise personnel costs and cut into profits. Once you hire someone, it's not easy to let them go. It was cheaper to call on nearby or affiliated doctors temporarily. No one here worked for free. The reality was that without profits, the hospital couldn't stay afloat. But still, with the constant overflow of patients and hours-long wait times, I couldn't believe this was sustainable. Then again, that was just an outsider's opinion. They must have held their own discussions internally and decided this was the way to go. It didn't matter what I thought. But still, with those unpleasant thoughts floating around in my head, I made my way to the large hospital. The weather was awful, with a heavy downpour soaking everything. Holding my umbrella, I walked toward the towering structure of the hospital, which loomed over the city no matter which direction you looked from. Its exterior, like a luxury high-rise, exuded an imposing presence. It was a stark contrast to the tiny hospital where I worked. Reaching the staff entrance, I placed my hand on the doorknob only to see something that made me think my eyes were playing tricks on me. That can't be right, I muttered, slinging my closed umbrella over my arm and rubbing my eyes before looking again at the courtyard. It seemed I wasn't imagining things after all. Unbelievably, there was a woman in pajamas, standing in the pouring rain. She had to be one of the hospital's patients. She stared up at the sky, as though completely oblivious to the rain drenching her. Her profile was delicate, otherworldly, and beautiful. Yet she radiated an aura of overwhelming sadness. For a moment, I forgot all about time as I stood there staring at her. Snapping out of it, I shook my head a few times and rushed toward her. "What are you doing out here? You're going to catch a cold if you keep standing in this rain." I held my umbrella over her, shielding her from the relentless rain, and that's when I noticed it. The woman was crying. The rain had masked her tears, so I hadn't seen them until now. As she slowly turned toward me, her eyes were red from weeping. How long had she been here? How long had she been crying? I didn't know, but she was clearly consumed by grief. I waited for her to answer. Beautiful woman didn't open her mouth easily. But finally, in a thin voice, she muttered, "They said they have no time for someone poor. And because I have an incurable disease, there's no point in treating me." She fell silent again, closed her eyes, and let fresh tears stream down her face. But that was all I needed to hear to understand. This woman was a patient here, and she had been abandoned by Shane, the cruel son of Mr. Carter. There was no other way to interpret it. From the woman's demeanor, I could sense she was thinking, "I'm beyond saving anyway, so what does it matter if I get soaked in the rain?" Her tear-streaked face showed a resignation that said she had given up on everything. As a doctor, I couldn't just leave her like this. I don't know who told you what, but it might still be too soon to give up. For now, let's get out of here. You'll catch a cold if you stay in this rain. She didn't say a word. But when I gently urged her to walk, she followed me. I needed to find out about her symptoms. I called my hospital and informed them that things might get complicated. Our hospital was small, but we have several doctors who can be called geniuses. With their help, I was sure we could do something. Before heading back, I managed to coax her name out of her. Her name is Alice. It suited her beauty perfectly, though this wasn't the time to say something like, "That's a lovely name." I kept my thoughts to myself. Before I could take Alice to my hospital, there was something I had to do. I moved her to a covered area, handed her a towel and blanket loaned to me from the hospital, and headed to my usual spot. And then headed to where Shane was, still barking orders with his usual arrogance. "You're late again. When we call, you need to come immediately. We're busy here." Shane snapped. I cut him off mid-rant. "I need to ask you something. There's a patient here named Alice, right? Alice? Oh, that poor girl. We don't have time to waste resources on someone like her. She's not one of our patients, she doesn't have any money. What about her? I'll take her to my hospital." "You don't care about her, so it won't be a problem, will it?" Shane gave me a look like I was the biggest idiot he'd ever seen. Do as you like. Operating on her would bring in zero money anyway. We don't have time for surgeries that aren't cost effective. It's far more productive to take care of our big spenders. The fact that he could say something so disgraceful without batting an eye, it was appalling. But saying anything to him would be pointless. Well then, I'll be leaving for the day. How pathetic. I bet you were just fooled by her pretty face. You think you'll save her and maybe, just maybe, she'll fall for you? Gross. You might think I'm a monster, but you're no better than me. If you're not going to help, then get out. You're in the way. I swallowed my anger, glaring at nothing in particular to calm myself down, and hurried back to Alice. Are you feeling cold? Let's go, it's not too far from here. About a 10-minute walk. Okay. It was just one word, but at least she responded. When we arrived at my hospital, I took her straight to the examination room. Before we begin, can I ask about your condition? At my question, Alice looked down. Her expression clouded. For a while, silence filled the room. I waited patiently. Finally, she raised her head and softly said the diagnosis. They said I have heart valve disease. Heart valve disease. I see. This was a serious condition. Medication alone wouldn't be enough for a cure. To treat this properly, she would need open heart surgery. If left untreated, even without symptoms, the 5-year survival rate was only 50%. If symptoms of heart failure had already begun, her life expectancy would be just 2 to 3 years. The surgery was complex. After opening the chest, the heart would have to be temporarily stopped, then cut open to repair the valve. Although the failure rate of the surgery itself is low, it is a complicated procedure. So it was easy to imagine Shane tossing it aside as not being worth the money. He would have shunned her by saying she was incurable, poor, etc. The first doctor she met was the worst. I knew it would be difficult. Sorry for making you look like that. It seemed I had been unconsciously making a difficult expression. Shaking off all the negativity, I spoke firmly. Yes, it's a difficult disease, but don't worry. I'm not going to abandon you. There are skilled doctors here at our hospital, not just me, and we will give everything we've got to save you. That's right, I would never abandon her. Because I had faced a situation like this once before. Memories of my mother surfaced in my mind. How many years had it been? My mother had been diagnosed with a severe illness. I was just a child back then, too young to remember the name of the disease. Yet, the scenes remained crystal clear in my mind. Both my parents were still young. My mother had suddenly been hospitalized. I overheard a conversation when relatives came to our house after visiting her. Why does someone as kind as her, who always wishes for others' happiness, have to suffer like this? My father had cried out, and then, for the first and only time in my life, I saw him break down in tears. Our relatives had tried their best to console him. Everyone thought my mother wouldn't make it. But she survived. The surgery's success rate was less than 20%. Yet the doctor who took charge of her case refused to give up and performed the operation flawlessly. Because of that doctor, both my parents are still alive and well today. Whenever I visit them both during their long breaks and see how happy they are, I am reminded of how deeply grateful I am to the doctor I was then. No. I got lost in memories. You don't need to worry about anything. As for the hospital fees or surgery costs, you don't have to pay them all at once. We'll arrange a plan that works for you. Please trust us and leave it to me. Alice looked straight into my eyes. Her expression was no longer the hollow, resigned look of someone who had stood in the rain. There was life in her eyes now. Please. I trust you. I feel like I can leave everything in your hands. If it doesn't work out, I'll just accept that it was my fate. Don't talk like that. We're going to help you with everything we've got. Our team of skilled doctors will save you. Thank you. Hearing you say that gives me so much hope. For the first time, Alice smiled. It was far more captivating than the sad expression she had worn earlier. After that, I spent my days working with the talented doctors at our hospital to create a surgical plan for Alice. Our hospital may have been small, but it was full of doctors brimming with passion, people who wanted to confront patients' illnesses head-on and help them return to their normal lives. We consulted experienced surgeons, listing out the best possible methods for the operation. And before I knew it, the day of Alice's surgery had arrived. I'll do it. I'll make sure the surgery is a success. In the midst of my hot and strong determination, I received a phone call from someone whose face and voice I did not want to see or hear. I heard something unbelievable, so I had to call. Are you really planning to go through with that woman's surgery? Ever since I had taken Alice under my care, Shane had stopped calling me for help. Or rather, even if he did call, I simply didn't respond. After seeing how he treated Alice, I had no intention of listening to him ever again. Of course, I still worried about the patients at his hospital, but I wasn't omniscient or all-powerful. Sometimes, you have to make choices. Perhaps that's why Shane, who had previously kept his tone somewhat businesslike, was now speaking to me with an overly casual air. Yes. I'm sorry, but I don't have time to talk. May I hang up now? Come on, don't be like that. Look, if you want, I can send you an easier patient instead of dealing with that troublesome woman. There's no shortage of patients who can't pay, you know. You like taking care of the rejects, don't you? That won't be necessary. I'll be focusing on the surgery now, so I'll take my leave. Acting all noble, huh? I was offering you something helpful, and you refuse? Don't get cocky. You're not as important as you think, you know. There was no point in dealing with him any further. I silently hung up the phone. I didn't have time for his nonsense. Before the surgery, Alice sat nervously, her expression tense. Of course she was nervous. For us, as doctors, surgeries are part of our daily lives, but for patients, this is not something they go through often. I wanted to say something to ease her mind, even just a little. Is there anything you want to do once you're healed, Alice? Something I want to do? There's one thing that comes to mind. That's great. What is it? I want to do something for my mother. I was raised in a single-parent home. We didn't have much, but I grew up surrounded by love. My mother worked so hard for me, even though her health wasn't strong. If it weren't for her efforts, I wouldn't be here today. I can tell that you were raised with a lot of love. It shows in who you are. Really? That makes me happy to hear. I want to overcome this surgery, meet a wonderful man, and start a family. I think growing up in a single-parent home made me want to build a family of my own even more. Hearing her words, I felt my resolve harden even further. Don't worry. I know you'll be able to build a beautiful family. We're going to make this surgery a success. I promise. I'll put everything I've learned and all my experience into healing you. Hearing that, Alice showed me the brightest smile yet. Her soft expression was radiant, far more beautiful than any sadness could ever be. We followed the surgical plan we had prepared so meticulously. Though success rates have improved over the years, the risk of failure is never zero. But this time, everything went according to plan, and the surgery was a success. When Alice woke up from the anesthesia and saw my face, she whispered a quiet thank you. Thank you so much. You successfully performed the surgery. I was so anxious last night that I couldn't sleep. But seeing Alice's face here now makes me so happy. Thank you. Alice's mother wiped away her tears with a tissue, repeatedly thanking me through her sobs. More than anything, I'm just glad the surgery went well. Taking a deep breath as I sat in the break room, sipping a coffee I had just bought from the vending machine. I had no idea that the results of this surgery would have such an unexpected impact on our hospital. We had implemented a new technique that had been gaining attention in the medical community, and its success spread like wildfire. Before long, the hospital's reputation soared, and patients began flocking to us. The effects didn't stop there. Our hospital, though small, offered a broad range of specialties. Patients who had been frustrated by the long waits and impersonal treatment at the large hospital began coming to us instead. The ripple effect reached even Shane's high-paying VIP patients, who also began seeking care at our hospital. I hadn't expected any of this. It never crossed my mind that the outcome of one surgery would spread so far and wide. Now that this had happened, I knew we couldn't just let it happen. Surely there is one person who does not feel good about this outcome. Shane came to my mind. And, sure enough, he responded in the most dramatic way imaginable. He stormed into our hospital himself. "Hey, Harry. Just because you've gotten a little fame doesn't mean you can go stealing our top clients. You're out of line. We called you in for extra cash, and this is how you repay us? You're an ungrateful piece of garbage." Shane's words came out calmly at first, but the fury boiling under the surface was impossible to miss. Still, it was nothing but petty resentment. He didn't realize that his neglect of patients and focus on profits had driven them away. "This is just a result of our hospital's philosophy, Shane. We've always prioritized caring for our patients. And this surgery simply brought that to light. If you continue treating patients as nothing but money, this outcome was inevitable. It was only a matter of time." When I said this in one breath, Shane was hostile and started to stamp his feet. It was the act of a child resentful of things not going his way. "Don't get so full of yourself. You're acting like it's all my fault. But I know what you're doing, you're spreading news of that surgery everywhere to show off. A tiny, second-rate hospital like this wouldn't stand a chance otherwise. Don't think you'll keep writing this way forever." Shane spat out his parting words, his anger radiating from every fiber of his being as he stormed out. It's no use talking to him anymore, I thought. Shane and I were fundamentally different. Even if we spent an eternity arguing, we would never reach a common ground. It was pointless to even try. Besides, we worked in separate hospitals. I figured we would probably never cross paths again, so I focused on my own work. But then something completely unexpected happened. Rumors began to spread that I had committed multiple medical errors in the past and had been covering them up. The response has been tremendous thanks to the extensive coverage on the terrestrial news. And our hospital has been receiving so many calls that it has interfered with business operations. I have no idea what they're talking about. I swear, I don't know anything about this. After the news broke, the higher-ups at the hospital called me in to explain. I opened with those words immediately. Be that as it may, this was reported widely on the news. Isn't it possible someone dug up something from your past? With all due respect, I haven't hidden anything. I've never made a medical mistake, let alone covered one up. I truly don't understand how this could be happening. You've worked hard for us for a long time, and you successfully performed that new surgical technique. I want to believe you, I really do. But the pressure from public opinion is hard for a small hospital like ours to withstand. Wouldn't it be easier just to cut ties with him? That would settle the issue and protect the hospital. No. Let's take a break. We'll clear our heads and revisit this with cooler tempers. The discussion ended in deadlock. I was told that my fate would be decided after the break, so I walked aimlessly through the hospital corridors. What the hell am I supposed to do? That thought played on an endless loop in my head. No matter how hard I tried to think of a solution, I couldn't come up with anything. In the first place, I did not do anything, so there is no way I can find any evidence. But as the rumors spread, the impact began to show. The number of patients coming to the hospital dropped dramatically, and even inpatients began to be transferred to other hospitals. The speed of it all was staggering. You could visibly see more empty rooms each day. My colleagues, who I thought were my friends, at first said to me, "You don't do that," but recently they have been distant. As if they don't want any trouble at all. This was what hurt the most. I had thought we shared strong bonds of trust. Now, I felt completely alone. It seemed like everyone was looking at me with suspicion. How did it come to this? I had worked so hard for the hospital and for my patients. Where had things gone so wrong? It felt like some invisible force was at work against me, something I couldn't fight. If that's true, there's nothing I can do about it. Because how can I catch the tail of such a thing? With despair weighing me down, I continued wandering the halls. However, I did not know myself how long I could endure this state of affairs. I knew it wouldn't take long for my heart to completely give out. When the break ended, I returned to the meeting room. The executives' faces were as grim as before, and hopelessness swallowed me whole. "Do you have any final words to say?" "No. This is for the good of the hospital. I hope you understand. Why do I have to go through something so unfair?" My spirit had been completely broken. I felt like I couldn't fight anymore. I was ready to accept whatever punishment they decided on. I stared blankly at the sterile ceiling. Then suddenly, the door burst open. Alice walked in briskly, her expression calm but determined. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just walk in without knocking. This area is off limits to unauthorized personnel." Ignoring the harsh words directed at her, Alice spoke sharply and confidently. "I've been listening outside for a while now. Why is this discussion proceeding as if Dr. Smith is guilty? I was one of his patients. And I know him well enough to say this. There's no way a doctor as dedicated to his patients as Dr. Smith would ever cover up a medical mistake. Even when we talked, he always had his patients' best interests at heart." I was stunned. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect Alice to storm into this room and defend me so boldly. "If you're so sure," one of the executives began, "can you provide evidence to prove his innocence?" "Absolutely. I have a lead that can uncover the truth. Give me a little time to investigate." Alice turned to me, giving a firm nod before striding out of the room with purpose. "Well, it seems you have at least one patient who trusts you," the executive said. "We'll give that woman time to conduct her investigation. But we can't wait forever. Until then, you're on suspension." And so, I found myself confined to my apartment, unable to focus on anything. Alice's sudden entrance replayed in my mind over and over. How could she be so confident? She said she had a clue, but I had no idea what it was. 3 days passed. Without a single call or message. I began to fear the worst, that no one would contact me, and I'd simply be dismissed from the hospital without a word. That thought loomed constantly in my mind, gnawing at me. I stopped eating, drinking only the bare minimum of water. Just as I felt I couldn't endure the stagnation any longer, my phone rang. The number was unregistered. Warily, I picked up. "Sorry for the sudden call, Dr. Smith. We found proof of your innocence. Can you come to the hospital right now? Is this real?" I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. "Yes. I'll explain everything when you get here. Please trust me." Her voice was confident, brimming with resolve. Finally, I showered, shaved my overgrown beard, and made my way to the hospital feeling lighter for the first time in days. At the entrance, Alice was waiting for me. "Everything's been arranged. Let's go." When we entered the conference room, the executives were seated, and there, sitting nervously, hunched in his chair, was Shane. I knew it. I thought maybe, or rather, Shane's words, "Don't think that things will continue to go well like this in the future," were sticking to me so badly that I thought he was going to do something about it. But I also knew he wouldn't be so bold as to make up a medical error. Let me start by saying this: I am a police officer. The room fell into stunned silence. I suspected that someone was intentionally spreading false information about Dr. Smith's alleged medical errors. So, I used every tool at my disposal to investigate. What I found was that Shane here orchestrated the entire smear campaign. All eyes turned to Shane, who looked visibly shaken. Still, he wasn't the type to admit defeat so easily. "What proof do you have?" "You're making this up." "And who's to say you're really a cop?" Without missing a beat, Alice pulled out her ID badge, holding it up for all to see. That could be fake. Call the police and confirm it. Don't listen to this crazy woman. Shane's voice rose in panic. "You're just bitter because I kicked you out of the hospital. Don't get cocky just because you survived one stupid surgery, you broke loser. Can you explain this?" She then thrust an A4-size sheet of paper in front of Shane with a large picture of a man with a bad physiognomy. In an instant, Shane's complexion turned earthy. This individual was paid to hack media outlets and spread the fabricated stories about Dr. Smith's medical malpractice. "We found him. And when questioned, he spilled everything. He confessed to working under Shane's orders. There's no escaping this now." "No, wait, this is a mistake. You have it wrong." At that moment, Mr. Carter suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Shane, you despicable fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? If this gets out to the media, our hospital will be ruined. You've dragged us all into this mess. You'll bear full responsibility for this. Pack your things and get out now. From this moment on, you are no longer my son. I've also heard about how you've been discriminating against patients, prioritizing the rich while bullying others and threatening our doctors to stay silent. You're a disgrace to everything we stand for as medical professionals. Now leave." "No, this can't be. Get out." Terrified by the sight of him banging his desk repeatedly with his fist in a rage, Shane fled out of the conference room as if to escape. No one ever saw him again after that day. Rumors floated around about a man wandering aimlessly through desolate places, looking over his shoulder in constant fear. It seemed that Shane, now obsessed with avoiding anyone's gaze, lived like a shadow, hiding away from the world. What happens when someone who worshipped money loses everything? Only God knows. And now, for the epilogue. A few hours after Shane left the hospital, the media began publicly announcing that the claims of my medical malpractice cover-up had been false. The news spread across online platforms as well, and slowly but surely, the tide of public opinion turned in our favor. Not long after, my fellow doctors came to apologize to me. We didn't want to act like that, but Shane was watching us, and we had no choice but to keep our distance. Everyone said the same thing. Now, things are back to normal between me and my colleagues. I understand why they acted the way they did. Nobody wanted to fall into the same trap after seeing what happened to me. It couldn't be helped. With Shane gone, it was time to let it all go and move forward. There was also a change in my personal life. After things calmed down a bit, I invited Alice to dinner to thank her for believing in me and working tirelessly to gather evidence to clear my name. When I met and talked with them in private and on equal footing, rather than as doctor and patient, I learned that we both take professionalism and pride in our work. Not only that, but we discovered we had a lot in common. Even our hobbies matched surprisingly well. Where should we go next? When can we see each other again? As we made promise after promise, something deeper grew between us. And we eventually started dating. Having overcome that crisis together, I know we can face any challenge that comes our way. I want to build up the warm family that Alice told me about at that time,